Welcome back. It's 6:35. Time now to take a look at your Wednesday morning newspaper front pages. The Daily Telegraph focusing on Poland, who've offered fighter jets to the US to use in Ukraine.
The Mirror, it leads with President Zelensky's speech with the words, "We will fight them in the air, the forest, the fields and the streets. We will never surrender."
Guardian writes about the blow to Putin as Britain and the US ban Russian oil and gas.
Here's the Mail, shaming of Bercow as the ex-Commons Speaker is exposed as a serial bully and banned from Parliament for life.
And The Sun has the story of the squaddies who've gone AWOL to fight Vlad.
And that's one of the stories we're going to talk about with Kriss Akabusi here. So it's front page of The Sun, Kriss. Queen's Guard AWOL to fight Vlad. Tell us all.
Yeah, so it's a young lad. He's 19 years of age. Doesn't tell me how long he's been in the army. Maybe it could have been as long as 3 years. I joined the army at 16 and a half. Fed up with ceremonial duties and has bought a one-way ticket to Poland and, as we speak, could actually have found his way into Ukraine. Now, it interested me as an ex-soldier, knowing how easy it is to get triggered. When this all started, you know, I've been out of the army for 30 years.
Yeah.
But immediately, for the first couple of days, I myself got triggered and wanted to get myself involved in some way, shape or form.
What do you mean when you say triggered?
Well, I mean, you've done all your basic training,
yes.
training.
Yeah.
You
want to put it into practice.
Skills.
Yeah, exactly. You've got skills, and you begin to feel that, oh my gosh, your own people. So for some reason, I'd linked what's going on over there with my own family, my children.
Yes.
And so you get this idea you want, fight or flight.
OK, but there is a big difference here as to what you would feel and what this young lad would feel. And the difference is he is a serving soldier,
yes.
And you could get the Russians to say, oh, he's a spy, he's behind enemy lines, we caught him, and this is a British incursion.
Well, that was the first thing. When Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, said her piece about, off you go.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, hang on, what you can have here is undercover, veil, Secret Service personnel going in and doing whatever they do in the secret operations. And certainly if I was Vladimir Putin and stuff, that's exactly what I'd be saying.
Yeah.
These are secret forces. Forget all this, I'm a Johnny-come-lately, who are clandestine, going in and doing these covert operations. So yes, that is a very definite problem you've got if you've got ex-servicemen, or current serving servicemen, because hitherto we've had people like me who should know better, ex-servicemen going in there, but if you've got currents of going AWOL,
you can't have it.
Into this theatre, we are in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Nabila Ramdani, I want to ask you about these NATO jets on the front of the Telegraph and the Times, being described in the Times as a significant escalation, that they're offering these jets to Ukraine, but this hasn't been given sign-off by the United States, and I have to say it's probably unlikely to at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I mean, if that was the case, that would be indeed a very significant escalation. We are talking about 28 Soviet-era jets, which Ukrainian pilots are trained to fly, so that would be easier for them to maneuver, and which are said to be delivered to the Ramstein Air Base in Germany and will be made available to the US immediately and free of charge. Now, since we've heard from the Americans that they haven't been briefed about those jets and that they are not very keen on getting them handed over to the Ukrainians, and we can see why. I mean, that would be open up the whole situation to a direct confrontation with Russia, a situation that NATO and its allies are unlikely to consider at the moment, and I have said so very emphatically. But I have to say that the transfer of formidable weapons to Ukraine will, of course, be welcomed by many, but I personally find it very hard to be gung-ho about the transfer of any weapons around the world. As we know, industrial military complexes, they make billions out of the trade, and whatever conflict you're looking at, there is no doubt that the more weapons you pile in, then the more people die, and indeed the more infrastructure is destroyed. And, of course, nobody wants to see the Russian military machine win in these conflicts, and the Ukrainians should absolutely be able to defend themselves.
Nabila and Kriss, I want to ask you now just about the Zelensky address yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
And first of all, Nabila, were you impressed? Did it raise you to your feet? Did you applaud? I understand it was special, but can I just say, why didn't he speak in English?
Well, I found that it was really an incredible story, if you think about it, to see the president of Ukraine.
Yes, I get that bit, but I thought he missed a trick by not speaking English.
Does he speak English?
Yes, he does speak English. By not addressing the mother of all parliaments in English, so that everyone's on his side and everybody sees his Churchillian and Shakespearean references.
Does lose a bit in translation.
There was an awful translator on one of the stations. I had to keep flicking to get somebody who wasn't panting or saying
a lot of pressure doing that. You try.
Well, I think if you can speak the dialect, it should be quite easy to translate like that. But there was I won't name the channel, but I had to switch, and that was it.
It might be part of being, all nationalistic and indeed, speaking on behalf of a sovereign nation and use the Ukrainian language. It was a bit odd to see the government front bench using simultaneous translation, but I don't think it reduces the impact. I think he still managed to deliver pure rock star diplomacy, dare I say, and international statesmanship of our time. But what keeps jumping into my mind, however, is how vulnerable this poor man is. Mm-hmm. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the fact that there are some extremely dangerous people who want to kill him, and his entire country faces destruction. So I think we should not get too carried away with the glamour and excitement of such announcements.
Exactly. I mean, it looks like theatre, but it's certainly not. And he's gotten his point across. I could imagine right now that Vladimir Putin detests the idea that this guy's getting all the column inches, this guy's getting all the favourable televisual shots. But as Nabila has said, this is it's not theatre, and he's trying to get across the pathos and ethos of his country and the dire straits that they're in, and the requirement that he requires the blockade of the airspace. And we keep on saying, clap, 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 but no, we're not going to do that. And I think that's the piece that he's really looking for.
Shall we look at the significant, what do you want to call them, bans or reduction in consumption of oil and gas from Russia announced right across the board, not just from America, who obviously went further because they're less dependent, but from us. And also, I suppose, most significantly, big plans to try and make changes from the EU, being covered on the front page of The Guardian, Kriss.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, yesterday I went to work, had a conference, and then I've pulled in at a motorway station, and it was £1.75 for a litre of fuel. It was empty. So nobody's fueling up at petrol stations on a motorway unless you absolutely have to.
Now that is interesting, because they're more expensive than any other petrol stations
100%.
Anywhere else. So you're saying it wasn't that they'd run out, it was just when people were giving them the buy ball.
Absolutely. No, people not going there. So sooner or later, the fuel industry is going to have to think about how it subsidises these.
Well, Shell did a bit of a U-turn yesterday, didn't they?
Did they?
They got in trouble for what they...
Yeah, they bought a very cheap
some cheap Russian oil, and they've now pulled out of Russia, and they've also, I mean, there's some lines overnight, which I can't think off the top of my head, ceasing all operations in Russia, and they're closing all forecourts in Russia as well.
Yeah. I was also interested to see, though, in the UK, that 157 in the UK at supermarket stations, and there wasn't if you remember, sort of like 6 weeks ago or whatever, there was a big queues and they were running out.
Yeah.
There weren't big queues, although there was more activity at the supermarket, so people are choosing the cheaper versions. But what Boris Johnson has said, even though we're doing these very stringent sanctions on the US, on Russia, supply is not going to run out. Don't panic buy. And I think that message is reaching us at grassroots. Because how is this going to affect us at grassroots? We've seen another thing. Sorry, I'm going all over the place now. At the weekend, I went to someone's house, head teacher and a teacher, darkness everywhere, one room heated. So people all of a
I
sudden...
like this idea. It's really interesting, isn't it? People are not using as much fuel to try and say, I'm not fueling the war machine of Putin.
100%.
So
people are just slowly regulating their own use of fuel. So it is interesting. It is going to impact us. We see what America and the European Union are doing. It's a massive coordinated effort. But we've got to think on our feet down here because it is going to come and affect us on the ground.
Nabila?
Well, I think, there's been a lot of stories already about, in recent months, about rising energy prices and especially in the UK, and some are partially in relation to the cataclysmic war, especially more recently. But I think rises in prices will affect millions of people, and wars inevitably lead to rising prices, to shortages, and to generally a more chaotic economy.
We go to the Mail, and you want to talk about the former Speaker in the Commons, John Bercow, and it's about the shaming of, the Mail says the shaming of Bercow. So just what do you make of this, and just remind people what this is all about?
Well, the Mail actually leads on this story, which is about a damning report about the former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow. He was banned. He was the subject of an investigation which ended with him banned from Parliament for life, and he was found guilty of being a serial bully and indeed a serial liar. Now, this is the conclusion of an independent panel which was chaired by a former appeals court judge, and it upheld 21 claims of bullying made against him by 3 House of Commons staffs. Now, the allegations include him smashing a mobile phone on a desk, swearing at officials, and losing his temper when an aide said he couldn't carry toothpaste in his hand luggage. This is a pretty... It's basically effectively writing him off completely. There was a time when someone like John Bercow would have been called a bit of a character, and his critics would have left it at that. But this report is absolutely scathing, which is pretty extraordinary when you consider the august position he held. And in the end, the Mother of Parliament is all about, English manners and decorum. And the Speaker is one of the central figures. So it really is quite shocking to hear Mr. Bercow described in such strong terms as a serial bully and a serial liar, and who subjected his staff to violent tantrums and the like.
So my challenge with all this, though, is the way that we've changed the concept of what bullying actually is. Now, I'm not there, I've not done the research, but when I was younger, bullying was actually physical abuse. And what I've just heard there is he squeezed his toothpaste, he smashed a mobile phone, and he raised his voice. When I think of my time in the army, then I was bullied every day. Squadron sergeant majors.
Well, there's a time and a place, Kriss. The army versus the Houses of Commons.
Of course.
I think bullying is bullying. If someone's exercising a violent temper and throwing things, that can be hugely intimidating, especially if you've got young people around you. I don't think it should be accepted. I'm
not certain. But then we just see that the term bullying has changed to all of these psychological and emotional and threatening things that you're now interjecting. But what I'm trying to say, so when I sit there, just like the idea of fighting, like nowadays, when you say fighting, we actually are not talking about fighting. So when you talk about fighting, for me, I'm thinking a bit of claret is going to be spilt. But actually now, when you say fighting, it's this sort of interaction at a raised temperature. Okay, so if that's what it is, what do you call claret being spilt? What do you call physical abuse? What's the terminology for that? So, okay, we've seen Bercow, he's been ejected, and that's why I think he calls it a travesty, because he's a relic of the past, from my world in the 50s, 60s and 70s, who's trying to interject things in the noughties and in the 2020s that are not acceptable. So I accept it's not acceptable, but I'm trying to think about this stretching the language where things change and don't mean what they used to mean.
Let us know what you think about that. Always interesting to have these sorts of debates. We'll have more from Nabila Ramdani and Kriss Akabusi for the next paper round. See you guys about 7:30. Thank you.
Front pages, let's have a look at those. Here's how they stack up, beginning with the Mirror.
It's leading with Zelensky's historic speech and the words, "We will fight them in the air, the forests, the fields and the streets." He concluded, "We will never surrender."
Guardian writes about the blow to Putin as Britain and America ban Russian oil.
The Daily Mail leading with the shaming of Bercow as the ex-Commons Speaker is exposed as a serial bully and has been banned from Parliament.
Here's the Sun, the story of the squaddy who has gone AWOL to fight Vlad, as they say.
Well, let's go through the insides of the papers. Today we're joined by Kriss Akabusi and Nabila Ramdani. Kriss, let's start with you and talk about the war in the south, as The Guardian on page 5 is describing it, talking about the targeting of Odessa, and they're really trying to get a hold of the port towns. Just explain what their angle is.
I think this caught my eye because most of our attention, I'm talking about the West, or certainly what I've seen here in the UK, has been on the 40-mile convoy and Kyiv, or how are we saying it now? But in plain sight, it appears that the Russian forces have made massive headway into the southern flank of Ukraine and are attempting to link a land bridge, so they say, with what it says here, with Russian peacekeeping forces in Breakaway and the place I've never heard of it before, but Transnistria of Moldova. And straight away what it made me realise is that, like, my parents came from Nigeria, and there are 250 different tongues in Nigeria, and when you talk about places like this, there are so many different tongues and forces, and Russia here seems to have infiltrated Crimea. Obviously, they now own Kherson, they're on top of. And you can see, actually, there's this strategy to sort of cut off this whole seaboard area of Ukraine so that it's landlocked. So that whatever happens, at some stage, we're going to have to start negotiating
to get it back.
To get it back. You can see that this is all of a sudden they've got this very strong position of owning this southern area of Ukraine, and it's going to be hard to get it back. Position being 9/10 of the law.
Nabila, just when we thought the news couldn't get any worse, COVID hasn't gone away.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there was no doubt that coronavirus knocked Brexit off the front pages, and now the Ukraine war is doing the same with COVID. But we should not get complacent about this terrible disease, and that's the story that the Eye is a reminder of. Essentially, COVID hospital admissions are rising, especially among the elderly, as immunity wanes. And the hospitalisation rate is rising in all 7 English NHS regions, including Scotland and Wales, after a period that we started to see early January. Now, this has prompted calls for the government to bring forward the rollout for the 4th dose of the vaccine and bring it forward instead of the planned schedule in early April, especially among the over 75s and those who are clinically vulnerable. I think more generally, what this story highlights is that, we've been told that some strict lockdowns seem unlikely for the moment. Having said that, Chris Whitty, the Britain's chief medical officer, has warned that there is a relatively high risk of another pandemic in our lifetime. And he said that there were near misses in the past, including Ebola and the Zika outbreak. And he warned that the risks are still there. So, scientists in particular believe that modern living puts us at a greater risk of animal-borne pandemics due to the global meat trade and also farming, our closer interaction with animals. So I think there's some food for thought about vegetarianism in a way, and it's probably the way forward.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Kriss, we're going to turn our attention back to this conflict in Russia and Ukraine, and it's a really interesting issue we want to talk about. Again, it's this story you've chosen in The Guardian about the Z symbol.
Yeah.
Now, a Russian athlete wore this, which is, we've seen it branded on the sides of military vehicles. We're seeing it now being sprayed on bridges, on buildings across Russia. And this athlete wore it on the podium and is unrepentant.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, when he was asked if he regretted his act, he said, no. If there was a second chance, I would do it again. I saw it on our military and looked at what this symbol means. Added, his name is Kuliak. And he said, it's for victory and for peace. And it just made me think about symbolism and sports. And maybe there needs to be a discussion about this. We've seen in the Premier League now, sportsmen and women, in the Women's Soccer League, taking the knee, for example. We see when there are anniversaries, sportsmen wearing armbands or ceremonial vests. And we might not like what this athlete has done, and it sounds to be like in a hot bother. Although I suspect that he was talking to his people in Russia as opposed to us in the West. But
it depends what it means. I mean, he thinks it means
peace and victory.
Peace and victory. The Sun today, they've got an article here, and they're saying it's the new swastika.
Well, but who said it's new swastika? Look, I mean, again, I'm not an apologist for Russia, and I don't want to defend. I think my thing is, who defines when it's right to have a symbol or a badge or commemorate something or not?
I agree with you. I cannot look at a football game now without them commemorating something or making a stand against something or whatever. And sometimes I just say, can I just have a game of football?
Yeah.
But just to go back to the point about the swastika, I mean, what did the swastika represent to the Nazis? They presumably thought it represented peace and victory. It's just that we knew the means that they obtained that was through, gassing people and land grabs and the like, which, you can say it has the parallel with the Z symbol and the Russians.
Well, yeah, again, I don't want to justify Nazism or the Z sticker. My point really was that this young man, who is a Russian, says for him it's victory and peace, and that's why he wore it, and that's why he's unrepentant, and he's speaking to his people in Russia. Sorry, I'm going to try and get this symbolism is something that needs to be discussed in sports. Is it appropriate for sports, or should it be banned totally? Just get on and play your sport, do your gymnastics, run your race, get your medal and raise your flag, and that is it.
Yeah, but then, it has a power. There's a soft power to sport, and we're seeing the good that can bring, the pressure that's brought to bear on countries.
So what this young man here is saying, I'm not justifying him, but what he is saying is that, yeah, this is what my people in Russia, his segment of the market in Russia, believe is peace and victory, and that's why I put it on there. I did it yesterday, and I'll do it again.
Well, I'll tell you, do you know what would get the authorities to move? If he put Puma or Adidas on there or any other sporting logo on there, they'd soon act on that. That's the hypocrisy of these people. They're saying, oh, we're not sure what to do about this or that, but if you bring commerciality into it and some sort of sponsor, they'll act.
We just had an email in on the Z sign from Elise Lacroix-Newman. She says this sign, Z, means defiance and victory against neo-Nazis. It was used by the Russian military during World War II whilst fighting Hitler. I don't know if that's correct.
But there are other letters as well, which confuses this whole thing that are on the side of military vehicles. But that is a very interesting point that she has there, because bear in mind as well that Putin is saying this is a war against Nazism. They've got to pull back the Ukrainian Nazis, whatever that means, Nabila.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's very hard to get into Putin's propaganda, effectively. The bottom line is he's invaded a sovereign nation illegally, and the international community, including NATO and its EU allies, are doing something about it. Now, the way they're going about it might be, in my view, questionable. I wouldn't condone pouring more arms into Ukraine. I would consider, I think, the only way out is often diplomacy and harder sanctions to try to cripple Russia economically.
Okay. Any story you want to finish on there, Nabila?
Yes, indeed. I think, you know, the civilian cost in all these conflicts, and especially in the Ukraine conflict so far, is utterly unspeakable. And the Daily Mirror has a spread about the inhumanity of it all and how terrified refugees are coming under attack, especially when Russian shelling is unrelenting, especially on civilian communities, trying to desperately flee this hell. And the number of displaced people is growing all the time. Now we have more than 2 million people who have been evacuated already. And again, the war has only started at the end of February. And I've spent a lot of time in refugee camps across the Middle East, and I can assure you that they are desperately devastating, sad places, and they are a testament to an absolute failure of humanity.
OK. Nabila Ramdani and Kriss Akabusi, thank you both very much indeed. They're going to be back in an hour's time. Hope you can join them for that. Here are your front pages on this Wednesday morning. They stack up like this, beginning with the Mirror.
It leads with Zelensky's speech with the words, "We will fight them in the air, the forests, the fields and the streets. We will never surrender." He was invoking the memory of Churchill.
And The Guardian writes about the blow to Putin as Britain and the US ban Russian oil.
The Sun has the story of the squaddies who've gone AWOL to fight Vlad, as they describe it.
We're going to talk about that in the newspaper review shortly. Daily Mail leading on the shaming of Bercow as the ex-Commons Speaker is exposed as a serial bully and banned from Parliament.
Time to go through the papers now at 8:34. We're joined this morning by Nabila Ramdani. She's a journalist and broadcaster and the former Olympic athlete and regular, has to be said, reviewing the papers with us, Kriss Akabusi. Nabila, I want to start with you. You've chosen the story that's on the front of most of the pages, the papers this morning, to be honest, but you've chosen the Metro, and this was this historic moment yesterday in Parliament, and we just heard from Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who said, you know, you really can't underestimate or overstate the power of symbolism like that.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the papers were bound to go for this story, and that's why we see it on so many front pages. And the Mirror's headline is quite significant. Hear, hero, and reporting on the standing ovation of the Ukraine leader's historic speech to MPs in the UK Parliament. Now, what was incredible about this speech is not only it's the President of the Ukraine becoming the first foreign leader in history to address the House of Commons. And I think that the speech was incredible in so many ways, not least of all because Zelensky was doing a Winston Churchill imitation. He vowed, for example, that him and his country will never surrender. But he was also wearing a casual T-shirt and speaking in Ukrainian. And I think what people love about Zelensky is that he's nothing like what you would expect of a tough Ukrainian president. He even comes from a showbiz background.
Have you got a crush on him? This is the important question.
Well, let's put it that way. He's young, he's dynamic.
That's yes.
But he's also very, very brave, and I think we should highlight that. Having said all that, I think we do get a sense in the media coverage that the conflict is still seen as a bit of a game, and there are lots of references to heroism and indeed noble sacrifices. But this completely, dare I say, ignores the absolute squalor and indeed the horror of winter wars and using some of the fiercest weapons known to mankind.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think some of the things that some of the reflected glory he's getting is actually from, there was a tweet that went out where it showed him where Putin and his aides had said he'd fled, he'd been offered to go away, and he showed a great article where he goes, "I'm here, he's here, he's here," and the pathos and the ethos, that little clip has percolated through this much more staged event. So I think it's that we realise actually in the bravery of the man to say that I will lead my people through the midst of this dire situation. We are here and we will not leave.
Yeah, put that next to the picture of President Putin at his extremely long table because he's afraid of catching a germ from many of his
100%.
generals. It is quite the contrast.
We go to the front page of The Sun, Chris, and we talk about how different people are motivated by what is going on in Ukraine and how they want to help. However, we've got a serving British soldier. He's from the Coldstream Guards. He's only 19 years of age. He's gone AWOL. And the theory is that he's gone to fight or help in Ukraine.
And he's there. So AWOL, absent without leave. He's fed up with ceremonial duties. He didn't join the army to wear his bearskin or whatever. He wants to go and put into practice all the training. And I understand this too. I didn't go to the Falklands, but was called up. I was with the 1st Battalion, Prince Wales, Own Regiment of Yorkshire. The Colonel called us in on Friday. We did our SOP-7s. We downloaded all of our kit. And on the Monday, we got bad news. Our regiment wasn't selected to go. Many of the soldiers who I was with were deflated. They, like this young man, they wanted to go and implement their training in a theatre of war. So I do understand.
Yeah.
And then you saw Sir Malcolm Rifkin say, there are 20,000 foreign personnel on the ground in Ukraine who, like this young man, want to engage in the theatre of war. But as Nabila said, this is no walk in the park.
Would you call, I don't know if money ever exchanges hands, but would you call men like this mercenaries?
Well, maybe not, because there's no idea that there's a financial inducement. But many of the 20,000 will be. But many of the 20,000 will also be SBS and SAS, Special Forces, undercover, protecting someone, for example, like the Ukrainian President.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Nabila, let's talk about the Financial Times. They're leading with this unbelievable, United move yesterday. There was lots of dancing around this for days, wasn't there? We saw all these economic sanctions coming, but no one was talking about the energy crisis. And they've decided they have to go further. The Americans going the furthest of all, the UK as well, and even the EU pledging as well to try and reduce the dependency on Russia.
Well, yes, indeed. And in my view, I think this is the way or the route to go down with choosing to cripple Russia economically, using all sorts of bans in order to perhaps avoid a forever war. But what I would like to focus on is the actual shelling, the shelling of Ukrainians desperately trying to evacuate cities where they're being relentlessly bombing, and Russian rockets are continuing to pummel civilian areas. And there were attempts at a ceasefire that was, many attempts that were resulted in failures in many ways. And eventually, the two sides managed to halt hostilities for long enough to allow some residents to leave the embattled city of Sumy in the northeast and Irpin on the outskirts of Kiev, the capital city. Now, the shelling of evacuation routes, in particular by the Russians, is unspeakable, and I'm afraid this shows that is how they are prosecuting their wars. We've seen that in Syria, wherever the Russians actually engage militarily, they are merciless. And remember that this war only started on the 24th of February. And in many ways, you have the impression that the Russians are still just getting going. And I fear that, we've already seen scenes straight out of hell, but I fear that this could get far, far worse.
That's terrible.
Chris, I want to go to The Sun now. This is page 19 in The Sun.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell us the story of Pepper, the border collie.
It's a lovely story. Pepper, the border collie, did a bolt in the park, lost his owners, and decided, I've got to get back. He ran 2.5 miles back to town, jumped onto the number 7 bus.
No.
He jumped on the number 7 bus.
Stop it.
He didn't take a seat. He stuck himself in the buggy park.
He's a gent as well.
And then alighted at the right stop where they are. And there was his family waiting for him, because somebody else on the bus saw Pepper, took a picture, said, "We got your dog." So Charlotte and Saffron were proud of the lassie heroics of Pepper. It just tickled me. Great little picture of this young border collie, bright, intelligent.
But it fascinates me because the doors of the bus opened. I always wondered what that word alighted meant. It means get off, right?
Yeah.
So the doors of the bus opened. He jumped off. Now, the reason I say this is everybody worries about losing their dog and whatever. And I always find with our dog, when we get into a 2-mile radius of the house or whatever, she perks up, she gets to the window, and I always say, how does she know this is the way home?
Yeah.
So there's something they smell, something they sense, something they see.
Yes.
And it is incredible.
Well, this is a great thing about perception and stuff, because we generally perceive through our eyes and our ears. But in a doggy world, their nose is 400 times more powerful than ours.
Yeah.
So that your dog, for example, will know where you were 24 hours ago, can still smell the residue.
So there's every possibility that that Pepper smelt the scent of his owners, which brought him to the bus station.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the...
or it could be the memory. I mean, we talk about elephants never forgetting, but this story shows that perhaps dogs have similar memories. I mean, they don't say much, but they seem to have...
Well, there would also be little markers, wouldn't there? There'd have been little markers in the town that Pepper knows as, that was where that, BITCH was, that small little BITCH was. Oh, yeah, and I'm talking about dog, of course. Yeah, I'm talking about... Can you say that?
What's a BT?
Don't ask. Female dog. Female dog.
Female dog. But that's what... Yeah, so it's got its markers. So Pepper knows exactly the topography and geography of the area through his nose.
Shall we end on this story from the Telegraph? Kriss, you've chosen this one. It's about taking responsibility for our own health. Now, this is something that we talk about a lot at GB News. We've become, obviously, through the pandemic, very dependent on the government taking care of us, haven't we? We were told what we could and couldn't do. Lots of people railed against that, but, you know, other people accept there was good reason for that. Have we become a bit more used to the nanny state? And are we struggling to cut those, what do you call them?
Links?
I want to say... apron strings,
yeah.
There you go.
Well, I mean, I like this article because actually your body, your responsibility, which seems to have gone against the narrative what we had actually in the past 2 years. And my concern here was with the NHS app, but I like the idea that we do need to take personal responsibility for our health. So what David Javid was saying was that half of the NHS budget is spent on preventable diseases, and we need to get a grip as a country, and that country is you and I. So, of course, there likely things that lifestyle, diet. I do 10,000 steps every day, minimum. Okay, I used to be a former athlete, so you might say, well, good for you. But we do need to start taking care of our own health. You know, smoking, losing weight, and what he's saying is that now things like the applications that we have, they are on our side, and we should be able to download, you know, get our blood tests done, etc., etc. So I do get where he's going. I am worried about the NHS app, though.
Nabila, where are you?
That, I think, you know, this very spirit of the NHS and how it was founded is to provide a safety net for everyone. So I think at the very basic level, there's a huge amount of responsibility from the state. Now, this is interesting because the Tory party is all about individual freedoms and individual responsibility, but having to face a global pandemic, something that we couldn't see coming, that we haven't handled before, something of this magnitude per se, or of this nature, had by default to take over. And so there's the paradox, you know, within the Tories' line, if you like.
Well, I suppose, you know, I'm a great advocate of this, and I have some grain seeds in the morning, which I just snack upon or munch upon with some water throughout the day, and that's how I set myself up.
That's good. No, but that's good.
I'm trying to show...
Talking nonsense.
may affect the way I'm thinking. I may have some form of forgetfulness, maybe as a result of that.
Because of the grain seeds?
because of the grains. I have too many of them, I might have to
Too much
resort to
healthy stuff. We might have to
bacon
eat a sausage
sandwiches,
roll
yeah,
or something.
Something like that.
You know, we know. Listen, it's been really good to have you guys in. Thank you so much, Kriss Akabusi and Nabila. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed you. Thank you very much indeed.